We were studying the drasha of Rabbi Bar Shmuel, which tells me that at the end of a certain counting period of X units, we sanctify the following day at the culmination of the counting period by bringing karbanos. Now, in the case of Rosh Chodesh, it's a one-day counting, meaning each day is counted unto itself. And after you get to 39, to 29 or 30, then you sanctify one day, just like you counted each day at a time. And that day is the day of Rosh Chodesh, which is sanctified by bringing the karbanos musaf of Rosh Chodesh. In the case of Atzeres, by analogy, we're going to look at the units of counting, but the units of counting in the case of Atzeres, meaning Sfir Sa'omer, is to count weeks. And therefore, when we finally sanctify the 50th day after the counting of 7 weeks, we have a sanctification of 7 days, which allows me, if need be, to bring the karbanos of Re'iyah and Chagiga for an entire period of 7 days. That means the first day is Atzeres, and we give them another 6 days. So the Gemara asks the following question. Ema Atzeres Chad Yoma. After all, in the counting of the Omer, we have 2 mitzvahs. We have one mitzvah counting weeks, Sheva Shabbosos Tmimos Tiena. We also have a mitzvah of counting days. It says Tisbru Chamishim Yom. So therefore, how do I know that that unit at the culmination of the counting is a unit of a week? Maybe it's only a unit of a day. Amar Rava, Atu Atzeres Yomei Maninan Shvuei Lo Maninan. What are you telling me? We only count days, we count weeks as well. So therefore, as far as the counting, in order to sanctify at the end of the 7 weeks, the 50th day, we can use the weeks as the unit of counting. And Omar, I'll prove it to you from a statement of Abaye regarding Sfir Sa'omer, mitzvah l'mimnei yomei, u'mitzvah l'mimnei shvueh. It's not sufficient to just count weeks. We have to count days as well. There's a separate mitzvah to count days. And therefore, we have not only days, but we have weeks. So we have a double compound mitzvah of counting both days and weeks. And therefore, we're going to use the unit of a week to derive Tashlumin, Viod, and furthermore, Chag Shavuos Ksiv. The Torah calls it Shavuos, which means count weeks. So the name and the essence of the holiday is indicated by its name, which is the holiday of weeks. And therefore, the counting unit is unit of weeks. And therefore, we're going to give you 1 week to sanctify by bringing the korban, which starts with the Atzeres and finishes 6 days later. Now, earlier we had a brisa on the previous daf that includes within the long list of Bal Tiacher mitzvahs, includes korban Pesach. So the Gemara says Pesach. Can you bring a korban Pesach on the regel? Bal Tiacher means you have to bring your korban and fulfill your obligation on the regel. The korban Pesach is brought on the 14th of Nisan. If you brought it, you brought it. You didn't bring it, you didn't bring it. But there's no possibility of bringing it later. You know, all other korbanos, you have a stretch of time, and we'll give you maybe up to 3 regalim, but not in the case of Pesach. Pesach zimni kvilet. There's a zman kavur, which is the 14th of Nisan. The akrave, lo akrave, idchile. If he didn't bring the korban on the 14th, is finito, as we say, you know, caramba, and ball game over. We have no possibility of bringing a korban Pesach on the 15th of Nisan. So where's the Bal Tiacher? Idchile is completely excluded after he didn't bring the korban on the 14th. Rav Chizda Pesach Kedi Nazba. When the Brisa mentions korban Pesach, it's only Kedi. Kedi means, you know, just to fluff it up, so to speak, to add something, but it's not really to be taken literally. There's no Bal Tiacher. And it's not shaykh to talk about Bal Tiacher with regard to korban Pesach. And Rav Sheshes comes up with a much more profound alternative explanation of Bal Tiacher with regard to Pesach. Although the Gemara is going to object to Rav Sheshes as well. Rav Sheshes Amar Mai Pesach, what does the Brisa mean when it mentions Pesach? It's not referring to the korban Pesach, but rather Shalmei Pesach. Okay, what's Shalmei Pesach? Here's the case. A man designated a lamb for the korban Pesach, and it got lost. It flew the coop. He now designated a replacement lamb, and then he locates the first lamb, the original. the status of that original is called Shalmei Pesach, which means it has the same status as Korban Shlomim. And with regard to a Korban Shlomim, we give you as long as 3 regalim, a whole year's time, a cycle of 3 regalim to bring that korban. So it's a brilliant insight of Rav Sheshes, except for one technical problem, which is a minor problem. We'll have to solve it. If that's the case, Hainu Shlomim. The Brisa enumerates an entire list of korbanos, which if you delay them, then you're guilty of violating Bal Tiacher, and on the list, Shlomim appears. So you can't tell me that Pesach is Mosar Pesach, means Shalmei Pesach, because Shalmei Pesach is really a korban Shlomim. Again, a korban that was designated as a korban Pesach, but it cannot be brought as a korban Pesach because it got lost, and we brought another replacement instead of it. That original korban Pesach is Shlomim. If it's Shlomim, then for sure it's included in Bal Tiacher, and it's mentioned in the list here of Shlomim. Is there any motivation, any justification for the Brisa, in addition to using the generic term Shlomim, to specify Shalmei Pesach? So the Gemara answers, I have an answer for you. Tana Shlomim aboy machmas Pesach, v'tana Shlomim aboy machmas Atzmon. We have a classic case of machmas atzmon, which means that you designated something as a korban pesach, as a shlomim. So from the get-go, it was a hakdasha of a korban shlomim. And then we have another case where, as far as atzmo is concerned, it's really not a korban shlomim at all. It only takes on the complexion and the character of a korban shlomim because he lost it and now he found it again. Okay, fine. So there are 2 categories of korban shlomim. But why do I need the Brisa to tell me both of them? In both cases, he has a full year, 3 regalim, and then he violates Bal Tiacher. Why did the Brisa feel compelled to enumerate both? And the Gemara answers, Sal Kedai Techamina, I would have thought, with regard to Shalmei Pesach, Hoil Umachmas Pesach Kof. Why are you bringing this korban shlomim? This is not a korban shlomim, which from the original get-go, he wanted it to be a korban shlomim. It's only because you designated it as a korban pesach and you couldn't bring it as such. The fallback position is that it gets the status of a korban shlomim, but in and of itself, it was designated as a korban pesach. And as we know, a korban pesach, you violate Bal Tiacher immediately, meaning there is no Bal Tiacher basically, because either you brought it on the 14th or you didn't bring it on the 14th. So there's no room here to talk about